testers and trainers. Just a quick introduction to my co-worker, Robert. Robert's going to demonstrate wearing some masks today. Down this side of the room, we've got a range of respiratory protective equipment. Here, we've got an instrument known as a Porter count that's going to help us to conduct ambient particle counting, face fit testing, quantitative testing, and then over here, we have a qualitative face fit test kit. If I could have the next slide, please, folks, that would be great. So, just an idea as to what you can expect from today's session, webinar, whatever you'd like to call it. The first thing we're going to do is to look at the legal framework surrounding face fit testing. I appreciate that this goes out to potentially a global audience, so I will say that we're focusing on UK guidance and legislation today. So the first thing we're going to do is look at UK legislation guidance and the associated guidance documents. We're then going to spend maybe 5–10 minutes looking at a quick introduction to RPE selection, so how to choose the correct respiratory protective equipment. We're then going to look at the 5 common types of respiratory protective equipment. So you can see I have a few examples down here that I can wave around. I might try on, Robert might try on. Then we're going to discuss facial hair. So as a face fit tester, this really is the nemesis of any face fit tester. So you guys are probably aware that any person expected to wear close-fitting respiratory protective equipment, such as this, must be clean shaven. So we're going to discuss facial hair. And again, we will be open to questions at the end of the session. Then we're going to look at face fit testing, the 2 common methods, qualitative and quantitative. We'll then round the session up with questions and answers if there's anything I haven't covered or anything you'd like a lot more detail on. So that's the plan for the next kind of 45 minutes or so. If I could have the next slide, please, that'd be great. So the legal framework surrounding face fit testing. I advise my clients that face fit testing is a mandatory requirement. More importantly, I feel that it is a moral obligation. People shouldn't be made ill in the workplace. Employers are offering respiratory protective equipment, and the only recognised method to prove that the mask offers the required level of protection is to conduct a face fit test. So hopefully you can see a flowchart on your screen, folks. Please let me know if not. So at the top of the flowchart, you can see the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. I don't want to bore people to death. You're all familiar with the basic principles of the Health and Safety at Work Act. We have to keep people safe and healthy. So to support the Health and Safety at Work Act, we could potentially look at the management regulations or the COSH regulations, both of which require an employer to identify and control risks. So you've done a COSH assessment, you've done a risk assessment. And the findings have said that our staff are exposed to an airborne hazard, which could be asbestos, it could be silica, wood dust, welding fumes, solvents. But we've identified a hazard. We now have to implement a control measure. And one of the control measures, quite often, is respiratory protective equipment in one of its various forms. So we've now got to comply with the PPE regs. Now, to help an employer comply with the PPE regs when it comes to respiratory protective equipment, we have a guidance document called HSG 53. That's Hotel Sierra Golf 53, Health and Safety Executive Guidance Document 53, surrounding respiratory protective equipment. So we've got a 59-page document that'll tell you most things that you'll need to know about masks. It'll go into the selection process. It will go into training, inspection, maintenance, storage, and it will also state in there a very, very important term that any RPE must be adequate and suitable. So in a nutshell, adequate, is it right for the hazard? Does it have the potential to protect? And then suitable, is it right for that individual? Now, to prove that the mask is suitable, the only recognised method by the HSE is to conduct a face fit test. So you can see the second from bottom square on the flowchart is a guidance document called INDG 479. That's a health and safety guidance document telling employers what they must do in respect of face fit testing. It details the accepted methods for face fit testing, which is essentially quantitative or qualitative face fit testing, depending on the mask that is in use. So there's actually a third method of face fit testing known as controlled negative pressure, but today we're going to look at ambient particle counting and qualitative testing. So the British Safety Industry Federation has launched maybe 20 years ago a fit-to-fit scheme, which is a competency scheme for face fit testers. They put together detailed practical guidance known as the fit-to-fit companion. So the fit-to-fit companion offers really good detailed practical guidance on face fit testing. It's the Bible for face fit testers. So as you can see by this legal framework, it doesn't matter what you do for a living, it doesn't matter what hazard you're exposed to, it doesn't matter on the continued wear time of a mask. If your risk assessment identifies the need for any close-fitting respiratory protection equipment, that individual must receive a face fit test. For some reason, that hasn't quite got through to certain sectors or certain individuals. I think it's up to us as a community of health and safety professionals to push, not just from a legal perspective, but from a moral obligation that any person who wears a mask receives a face fit test. I hope that's okay for everybody. Now, I'm going to ask if we could advance the slide once, and we should be looking at a slide entitled Adequate and Suitable. So you can see adequate, we need to consider, is the device, does it have the potential to offer the required level of protection? So what we're looking at here is the airborne hazard. What is its physical form? Is it a solid? Is it a liquid? Is it a vapor? Is it a gas? We also need to consider the amount of the airborne concentration of contaminant. We also need to consider what occupational exposure limits there is for said contaminant. So if we could just advance one slide, please, folks, we should be looking at a color-coded chart. And on this color-coded chart, you can see all the common filter types for the hazards that we could encounter. So, for example, if we're looking at the top of that slide, you can see a white color coding, which denotes a particle filter. We can get P1, P2, or P3, which is essentially particulate class 1, low protection, class 2, medium protection, or class 3. If, however, your employees are exposed to, let's say, an organic compound, then a particle filter would be no use, because a particle filter, unsurprisingly, protects against particulate. So you would need a type A filter for organic compounds. And again, we have a choice: class 1, class 2, class 3. How much protection do we need to offer to ensure that we reduce exposure by the occupational exposure limit? And we could go on. So, for example, the fifth color coding down is a type K filter, which is suitable for ammonia. So what we've got here is a range of filters. This is a type P filter for particulate. Here we have a filter for organic compounds and also acidic gases. Here we have a AVEC filter, which is quite a common filter. A, organic; B, inorganic; E, acidic; and K, ammonia. So as it stands, this filter will not offer particulate protection. We can also get combination filters. So we can see by the color coding, we've got an AVEC filter that also offers particulate protection. So when we're talking about an adequate mask, if we could please go back one slide again, we're now looking at adequate and suitable. We can see adequate is the device, is the filtration, does it have the potential to protect? So that's in most instances quite straightforward. We're looking at material safety data sheets, we're looking at air monitoring, we're looking at a COSH assessment. However, when it comes to selecting a suitable device, this can be trickier. We're now looking, not does it have the potential to protect, but is it right for that individual? Is it right for that individual? So we would consider, for example, not only do we need respiratory protection, but do we need eye protection as well, or impact protection? We need to consider, is it comfortable for the wearer? We need to consider the physical activity. We need to consider the physical fitness of that individual. What is their lung function? Because where we have non-powered respiratory protective equipment, it can be quite difficult or quite laboured to breathe through. So this doesn't suit every person. We also need to consider compatibility with eyewear, whether that be corrective or protective eyewear, because you will be aware that respiratory protective equipment can be compromised by corrective or protective eyewear. And then the big one is, does that mask create a seal to the wearer's face? And the only recognised methods to do so is to conduct a face fit test. So, if we could advance 2 slides, please, folks. We should now be looking at an introduction to respiratory protective equipment. And we can subdivide this. I'm going to cover 5 types of device today. We have close fitting or tight fitting hard face masks that are disposable. So this would be known as a filtering face piece, FFP3. Filtering face piece, you're only going to ever offer particulate protection. You can get class 1, class 2, class 3. So this device, a reusable hard face mask, or this full face mask, despite looking very different, they function in the exact same way. The wearer wears the device, they inhale, that creates a negative pressure within the mask, therefore air needs to rush in to the device. And air will always take the path of least resistance, the easiest route into the mask. So all being well, the device seals to the face, creates an efficient seal to the face. So when the wearer breathes in, the only route for air into the mask is through the filter cartridge or through the filter membrane. Now, exactly the same principle for this full face device. These have to create a seal to the face. All masks don't fit all faces, therefore we must conduct a face fit test. So there is an alternative type of respiratory protective equipment known as loose fitting. This is a positive pressured device. So we're going to look now at the 5 common types of respiratory protective equipment. And if we could advance 1 slide, please, folks. We should be now looking at a filtering face piece, FFP1, FFP2, or FFP3 mask. Now, if you just look below the main image, you should be able to see something called a protection factor. We've got a protection factor of 4, 10, or 20, respectively, for a P1, P2, or P3 mask. So this just isn't the filter efficiency. This is a combination of the filter efficiency and the expected inward leakage of the seal of a mask. So a P1 mask would reduce exposure by a factor of 4. So if you take the amount of airborne contamination, divide that by 4, that will give you an indication to the inhaled quantity of particulates. If you look below that, you can see an FFP2 mask will reduce exposure by a factor of 10. So whatever amount of airborne contamination there is, divide that by 10, that is the expected inhaled quantity. And we can also see, finally, an FFP3 mask. We have an assigned protection factor of 20. So again, whatever concentration of airborne contaminant there is, divide that by 20. That's how much contaminant is potentially going to enter the lungs. Now, a disposable mask is a particle filter, so unsurprisingly, it's only ever going to stop particulates. That could be solid particles or liquid droplets. It will not stop gases or vapors. So if people are wearing a particle filter and they can smell something, that is not an indication that it's not offering the required level of protection or it hasn't sealed to the face. It is, however, suggesting that we have the wrong filtration. Gas and vapors need gas and vapor filters, particle hazards need a particle filter. So if we're just looking approximately halfway down the slide, we can see work rate and continued wear time. These types of device, and it's very similar for a reusable respirator, are only suitable for medium work rate activities because we have an inhalation resistance. The lungs have to pull air through the filter membrane or filter media. So there is an increase in breathing resistance. Therefore, with that in mind, the recommended continuous wear time is up to 1 hour before the wearer stops what they're doing, removes themselves from the hazardous activity or hazardous area, has some respite before putting the device back on and re-entering the workplace. That said, we have other factors to consider, the ambient temperature, for example. We also need to consider the physical fitness of the individual. So if you are extremely physically fit, you could wear one of these for long periods of time without even noticing. If, however, you are maybe more senior in years, not of peak physical condition, undertaking excessively strenuous works, you have underlying health conditions such as occupational asthma or COPD, then you may struggle to wear this type of device. We can see approximately 2/3 down the page, and I will explain that this is a health and safety executive document. It's an extract from HSG 53. We can see face fit testing required, yes. We have two common methods, qualitative and quantitative. The either method is appropriate for half-face respiratory protective equipment. So that's a quick introduction to a disposal half-face tight-fitting mask, a filtering face piece. If we could advance one slide, please, folks. We're now looking at a reusable respirator. Now, this in essence is much of a sameness as this disposable device, same continued wear time, same protection factors. However, we can now add gas and vapor filtration to these devices. We can get combination filters, we can get particulate filters. So if your organisation is trying to decide between a reusable device or a disposable device, you've got a few things to weigh up, not least of all cost efficiency. So whilst these might come in at around, we'll say £3 for a good quality filtering face piece, and these are going to come in at around £30 for a good quality reusable respirator, it may seem that these are cheaper. However, with frequent use, these can pay for themselves many times over in quite a short space of time. A drawback of this device is it would require a full documented monthly inspection. So once a month, a competent person essentially strips it down to its component parts, so the straps, the diaphragms, diaphragm covers, filters, the body of the mask, inspects each component part, reassembles the mask, puts it back into circulation, and records that they've done so. Obviously, there is no maintenance requirements for this device. That's going to take me on to something of a halfway mask. Here we have a 28-day mask. It's a maintenance-free mask. We don't have interchangeable filters. So this mask can be worn on and off and on and off and off for a period of 28 days. We then dispose of it to get a new device. So the beauty of this 28-day mask is that there's no requirement for a full documented monthly inspection. It's only ever used for 28 days. That can be quite useful where we have time constraints. We don't have the required resource for mask inspection. Or if we're working in particularly grubby or dirty environments, we don't need to worry about cleaning the mask or making sure it remains fit for purpose for long periods of time. We simply wear the mask for 28 days before disposing of the device. Now, with any of these half-face respirators, we need to consider, is it compatible with protective or corrective eyewear? So this particular device, any half-face mask, needs to sit quite high on the bridge of the nose and also sit under the chin. Now we can see here, if I'm wearing some protective goggles, I don't have a great deal of nose left. So to accommodate the protective eyewear, or indeed corrective eyewear, we have to move the mask. We have to lower the mask down the face to accommodate the eyewear, and that could compromise the performance of the mask. So where we have half-face respiratory protective equipment, the performance could be compromised by corrective or protective eyewear. Therefore, if and when we are face fit testing these devices, it is imperative that the face fit test is undertaken with the eyewear that will be in use at the same time as the mask. Hope that makes sense to everybody. If we could advance one more slide, please, folks. We're now looking at tight-fitting, non-powered respiratory protective equipment. So we can start to explain some advantages of full-face respiratory protective equipment over half-face respiratory protective equipment. Now, what we can see here, when we're looking at a full-face mask compared to a half-face mask with a P3 filter, the full-face device will offer increased protection factors. We are now getting a protection factor of 40 for a full-face P3 mask compared to a protection factor of 20 for a P3 half-face mask. The standard of the filters is identical. They're made to the same European standard. However, the full-face mask creates a better airtight seal because it seals to a more uniform area of the shape of face, whereas a half-face mask seals to what is an awkward area of the face. So because we can achieve a better face seal with a full-face mask, we can now expect higher protection factors. We also now have inbuilt eye protection, impact resistance, also good for environments where we have mist or fumes and we want to keep ingress out of the eyes. A potential drawback of a full-face mask is that I could not wear my corrective eyewear with this device because the sidearms of my glasses would compromise the seal of the mask. So instead, if we have people who are bespectacled and rely on corrective eyewear, we now need to get the prescription glasses mounted within the device, which is an additional cost. These things are really, really good. They lend themselves to a number of sectors. However, they're not used as widely as they possibly should be. We've got inbuilt eye protection, we've got increased protection factors. Great news, but they cost a little bit more than half-face respirators. We've got the complication of corrective eyewear. And if we look kind of halfway or 2/3 of the way down the presentation, we can still see that these need a face fit test. However, we cannot conduct a qualitative face fit test for full face masks. We need a quantitative test for full face masks. This technology is inherently more expensive than a qualitative face fit test. Therefore, I suspect the requirement for a quantitative test for full face mask may reduce its popularity in certain sectors. So that is a quick introduction to non-powered, tight-fitting, full-face respiratory protective equipment. If we could kindly advance one screen, please, folks. We can now see a powered device, full-face, tight-fitting, still relies on the seal to the face, still got to be clean shaven. So every device that we've talked about so far, the wearer must be clean shaven, the wearer must receive a face fit test. On this device here, you can see a battery, we can see a power cable, and in there we have a tiny little motor. Now I'm going to try and power the motor up, and hopefully it's not going to interfere with the sound, so I'm just turning that on. And now you can hear, hopefully still me, and a motor running. Now, what that's doing, it's pulling dirty air through the filter, which means that there is no inhalation resistance. So what we can see approximately halfway down the page on this HSE guidance document is the continuous wear time is now more than an hour because we don't have any inhalation resistance. This can be worn for longer periods of time. It can also be worn with people who are not in peak physical conditions, so we've got built-in eye protection as well. Now, in the event of a powertrain failure, i.e. the motor isn't pulling air through the filter, this device would then convert to a true negative pressure device, i.e. the lungs work to pull air through the filter and we're still going to get the required level of protection. So often reserved for high-risk sectors such as the asbestos removal industry, we've got heavy physical works, we can't have a dip in performance, we've got the eye protection, so really good options for many sectors where we need these increased protection factors and we have longer continuous wear times. So that is your introduction to powered full face, tight fitting respiratory protective equipment. If we could please advance one more slide. We are now looking at a powered air purifying respirator, PAPR. Some people would refer to these as a powered hood. I like to refer to them as loose fitting devices because that goes some way to explain how they function. So I've got an example of a loose fitting device here. Here we have a belt mounted power pack, in this instance particulate filtration. We have a motor, we have a battery. This can be head mounted, it can be back mounted, it can be belt mounted. Today I'm going to choose to wear it belt mounted, and I can wear this device with my glasses, but there's a really good chance that they'll end up on the floor. So today I'm going to choose not to. So what we can see here now is we've got the back mounted filters, power the unit up, and if you keep an eye on the top of the hood, you will see that the device is inflated. So that's told you that this has a positive pressure. There's a higher air pressure in there compared to the surrounding atmosphere. What you can hopefully see as well is that communication isn't hampered. You can see my facial expression, you can hear me talking. Whereas if we have tight fitting respiratory protective equipment, you can see that communication is hampered. We can't see facial expression and it's muffled. So these devices are really, really good, and they have a number of advantages over tight fitting respiratory protective equipment. We have inbuilt eye protection that we don't get from half face masks. We don't need a face fit test. All the face fit test does is to work out if the device seals to the face or not. This doesn't rely on the seal. We have longer continuous wear times. We have no inhalation resistance. We have additional wear comforts because we've got air moving within the device, and that's going to work to cool an individual. We cool by evaporation. So these are good for more physical activities, longer wear times. The drawback of this device, or two drawbacks of this device, if the device isn't charged, if the powertrain isn't functioning, then the device would offer zero protection. Another potential drawback of this type of device could be cost. So an entry-level unit, we're probably looking at around £300. A mid-range unit such as this, we're probably looking at around £500. And premium units can stretch into 4 figures. So what we've just looked at is the 5 common types of respiratory protective equipment that many employers rely on. We haven't gone into self-contained breathing apparatus or anything like that, but the 5 main common types that most employers would choose to offer. And as you can see, all of these devices have their own pros and cons, and that's what we need to consider when we're selecting suitable respiratory protective equipment. All of these devices would be adequate to protect against a particulate hazard. Are they suitable for the individual? Hope that makes sense. Now, I'm going to ask if we could again advance one more slide, please, folks. We have to talk about facial hair. So any tight-fitting respiratory protective equipment, whether it's reusable, whether it's disposable, whether it's full face, or whether it's half face, must create an effective seal to the wearer's face, so that when the wearer breathes in, air enters via the filter, not through any inefficiency on the seal. So the Health and Safety Executive conducted a study several years back and published the findings in a document called RR1052. I'll just repeat that, that is RR1052. They took a range of male volunteers. They then took a range of half face masks of variable quality, different male faces, different facial hair growth rates, different facial hair thicknesses. They asked all of these gentlemen to have a close, clean shave. So we're talking shaving foam and a razor, zero facial hair, and they allowed the wearer to grow the facial hair for a period of 7 days. So you can see on the bottom of that graph we have time and day increments, how many days since that person last had a shave. And then on the vertical axis we can see the percentage inward leakage. And as a generalization, what we can see is the longer the facial hair gets, the worse the seal of the mask becomes. But again, this varies from individual to individual, from mask to mask. So you can see, if we're looking at across the lower parts of the graph, we do have some masks that do protect some individuals after 7 days worth of growth. So this might be a really good quality mask. It might be a relatively young wearer, a relatively baby-faced wearer, whereas other people, the mask can not offer the required level of protection after only 24 hours facial hair growth. So the general consensus is that the performance of the mask could be compromised with as little as 24 hours facial hair growth, and the level of protection would reduce as the facial hair gets longer. If we could advance one more slide, please, folks, we shall be looking at a poster with varying facial hairstyles. Now, it could be the case that certain moustaches or goatee beards or sideburns could be acceptable to be worn with tight-fitting respiratory protective equipment, as long as there's zero facial hair that contacts the seal of the mask. I typically would not use such images on my training courses because we also need to not consider the facial hairstyle, but the size of the face. We have big faces and small faces, and also the size and therefore contact area of the mask. So what I advise my clients, if there's any doubt whether the mask can be worn with a certain facial hairstyle, is to wear the mask in its intended position, to expose the seal of the mask to verify if facial hair contacts the seal of the mask or not. We need to treat this on an individual basis, every mask and every individual and every facial hairstyle. So I'm going to ask if we could advance one more slide, please, folks. I'm going to have a bit of a tidy up because I've thrown masks all over the place. And we have a look at qualitative and quantitative face fit testing. So on this side, we have a qualitative face fit test kit. And on this side, we have some quantitative face fit test instrumentation. And this is the ambient particle counting method. Each of these methods has its own pros and cons. And we're going to discuss the basic principles of each of these methods. And we're also going to try to run a live demonstration with the aid of Robert. So if we could advance one slide, please, folks. You're looking at a qualitative face fit test kit. And in that kit, you have three main component parts. We will have a hood. Now, the purpose of the hood is to hold an aerosol around the breathing zone. So during the test process, you would put your mask wearer inside the hood. Also in your qualitative face fit test kit, you can expect two nebulizers, which are identical. You are aware that a nebulizer will turn a liquid into an aerosol. And by definition, an aerosol is liquid droplets suspended in an atmosphere. They're pretty small. We're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 microns, something around that size. Also in the kit, you can expect 2 bottles of solution. This is typically a product known as Bitrex or denatonium benzoate, to give it its chemical name. One of the solutions is a very weak version of denatonium benzoate, Bitrex, and the other is 10 times the strength. So the basic principle of this test method, you take your nebulizer, you would then fill it with a weak version of Bitrex and administer this into the hood to verify if the mask wearer has the ability to take Bitrex or not. Not just if they have the ability or not, but how easily they can taste Bitrex or not. What is their sensitivity level? Once we've ascertained if they can taste Bitrex or not, we remove the person from the hood. We need to wait for that taste to clear, which could take up to 30 minutes. And then we would introduce some respiratory protective equipment. Now, despite me training Robert many times how to put a mask on, he hasn't quite got the hang of it. So I'm going to assist Robert in putting the mask on. We verified that the original taste has disappeared. We then need to put Robert back inside the hood, but this time he's wearing a particle filter. And particle filters will stop particles. What we're then going to do is to take the stronger version of Bitrex, and we're going to fill the hood with a certain amount of aerosol to challenge the seal of the mask, because these droplets, this aerosol, cannot penetrate the filter. So the basic principle is, if Robert was to taste this aerosol, it cannot fit through the filter. It must have gone in through the seal of the mask. What we then need to do is to conduct a series of timed exercises. Each exercise lasts for 60 seconds. And we have normal breathing through the mouth. We then have deep breathing through the mouth. We then have turning the head from side to side. Inhale, center, exhale. Pull the shoulder, inhale, center, exhale. We repeat that for 1 minute. We then have the same exercise, however this time we have a full extension. Inhale, center, exhale. Loop down, inhale, center, exhale for 1 minute. We would then ask Robert to talk out loud for 60 seconds, so we can now simulate the movement of the jaw to test the seal of the mask. We would then ask Robert to bend into the horizontal position repeatedly. Inhale at the bottom, exhale at the top for 1 minute. We then revert to normal breathing again. If at any given moment the mask wearer was to taste the solution, we abort the test. It is a failed result. That is not the correct mask. We, assuming are successful at this stage, we would then breach the seal of the mask to validate the test. Did they have the ability to recognize the taste if the mask was leaking? Now, this is a health and safety recognized method of fit testing. However, it's only appropriate to half-face respiratory protective equipment offering a degree of particulate filtration, whether that be P2 or P3. We cannot conduct this test method on a pure gas or vapor filter because a gas or vapor filter will not stop the challenge aerosol. So this test method has a number of pros and cons, some of which we've discussed already. Firstly, this method relies heavily on the competence of the face fit tester. The difference between a robust test and an average test is negligible. An average testing is less likely to identify ill-fitting respiratory protective equipment. So we need to make sure that the tester is competent. Another drawback to this method is it can be quite time consuming. So you've already seen that we administer a weak version of the solution without a mask. We then wait for the taste to clear for 30 minutes, conduct the test. Now, if we were to get a failed result, what we would need to do is to, first of all, to wait for the taste to clear. Once the taste clears, we then need to conduct another sensitivity test and then wait for the taste to clear before introducing another mask and testing on an alternative product. Pros of this method is it's relatively cheap, it's relatively expensive by that. It's portable. We don't need a power source. There's no calibration. So it is a decent method, but it does have drawbacks. Another drawback is the person being tested. It relies on their taste sensation. So if they do not have the ability to recognize the taste of the aerosol, the test won't work. The person being tested could also manipulate the outcome. They could give you a false failed result. They might do this to get out of certain activities. They might do this to get out of wearing a mask or to wear a different type of mask. They could also offer a false pass result as well. So whilst this is a recognised method, it does have its drawbacks. Now, what I'm going to ask is if we could advance the slide one more time. And we're now going to discuss quantitative testing, or more specifically, ambient particle counting, APC. So what we have here is an instrument made by TSI Instruments. It's known as a porter count. And it's connected to a laptop. Here we have the particle counter. Here we have a laptop. Now, I'm just going to power this device up. And whilst we're waiting for the device to power up, I'm hoping that you can see that I've prepared a mask for the test. We've added a probe to the front end of the mask. So what that's going to allow us to do is to attach the mask to the porter count. So we have a length of twin tubing. We have a blue tube, which is known as the ambient reading tube, and we have the respirator or sample tube. So what we would do is to connect the respirator tube to the test equipment. We would then ask the victim to wear the mask. Again, in this instance, I'm going to have to assist. We connect the mask to the test instrumentation, and then we would assign a specific mask and an individual. So I will try and zoom into the screen very, very shortly, or I'm more than happy to send screenshots out to anyone who wants them. I'm going to start the test. I'm going to try to move the camera, and hopefully what you can see on the screen, I'm just trying to get some glare out of the way. I'll try without the lights on. That's not picking up very well, unfortunately. I'll have to apologise for that, folks. I'll put the camera back over here, and I'll talk you through what's happening instead. We have two particle count readings. So the first particle count reading is taken from here, outside of the mask. And currently, this is giving me an ambient particle count of approximately 3,500 particles per cubic centimetre of air. So that is approximately a cubic centimetre of air. And we can see that we have approximately 3,500 particles per cubic centimetre of air. The second reading that has been taken is taken within the mask. And currently, I can see that we have 3 particles per cubic centimetre of air. And this is going to fluctuate, so I'm now down to 1 particle per cubic centimetre of air. We're up to 4 particles. And we again ask the wearer to conduct the same 7 exercises: normal breathing, deep breathing, head side to side, head up and down, talking out loud, bending over. But this time, we would be asking the person to simulate physical exercise. So we'll be walking up and down on an exercise step. That's going to kind of increase any front weight on the mask. It's going to simulate physical works. It's going to promote deeper inhalation. So this is a more robust test. It's a more accurate test. It tests down to a smaller particle size range. I'm just going to interrupt myself here, and I have the result of the first exercise. And we have a fit factor of 1,168. So now we have a numerical value as to how well the mask fits and protects. The Health and Safety Executive set a fit factor pass level of 100 or more for a half face mask. If, however, the person is wearing full face respiratory protective equipment, we need to achieve a fit factor of 2,000 or more. So we're now asking Robert to take deep breaths of air for exercise 2. And again, we just work through a sequence of events. If at any given moment we don't achieve the required level of protection, the software will abort the test. It will show us a failed result, and I'm just going to simulate a failed result. So what I can now see is we have several thousand particles in the mask. This is going to show as a failed result, and it will abort the test. We may be able to see the outcome appear on the screen any second now. So we have a failed result, the test aborted. All I would need to do now, I don't have to wait for any taste to clear. I would just prepare a different mask for the test, ask the person to wear the mask, restart the process, so we can test really, really quickly. We can test more accurately. We now don't have a reliance on taste. It cannot be manipulated by the wearer. The qualitative face fit test method will only ever test half face masks, whereas the ambient particle counting, the quantitative method, can test half face masks or full face masks. This is really, really, really impressive technology. So as a face fit tester, my preferred methodology is the port count method, all day, every day. It's a great method. I fully appreciate that certain employers would not have the financial investments for one of these units. So they would predominantly wear half face masks and would often select a qualitative face fit test method. Now, I'm just going to power down the equipment because it does make a little noise. And if we can advance one more slide, please, folks, you can see that that's pretty much it from me. You've had an introduction to the common types of respiratory protective equipment, the legal framework, some of the pros and cons of different types of respiratory protective equipment, and an introduction to the two common methods of face fit testing. You can see you've got my social media and contact details on there. Please, please, please do give me a follow on LinkedIn or Twitter, quite active there. If you have any questions about respiratory protective equipment, face fit testing, we're also a mass supplier, then please do get in touch. I think I'm going to pass you over to Sam.
Or Rob.
Anyone.
That's fine, no problem. Unless you want to take exam. We've not had any questions through as yet, but obviously we'd be grateful if anybody has got any questions to put to Nathan. I just want to say thanks, Nathan. That was absolutely fascinating. It's something that you do come across from time to time, and to see those different tests and all those different face masks, it is really, really interesting. And actually, I've learned an awful lot about the different types of beards and the names for them as well. So that was not something I've come across before, mate. So I never realised that there were so many names for beards. I think mine's just called Scruffy Get, but there we go.
I would like to ask a question, Nathan, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
And that is, in terms of repeating I know we do the face fit checks every time we would wear a mask, but in terms of repeating the face fit tests, some people are saying 1 year, some people are saying 2 years, some people are saying depends on when your face changes, your face shape, etc. What's your take on that?
Up until 2019, when we released the Fit to Fit companion, there was never a definitive time frame that was listed. So as you correctly said, if there's a change in mask, so a different make, a different model, a different size, a different specification, we need to repeat the test prior to bringing that mask into use. Another variable is the face. So that could be weight loss, weight gain, cosmetic surgery, significant dental work, a broken jaw, broken nose, broken eye socket, dermal inserts, piercings, dentures, braces. If there is a significant change with the face, then we need to face fit test. Something that is often overlooked is if we now introduce protective or corrective eyewear. That's a third variable. We've got the variable of the person, we've got the variable of the face. We also need to consider protective or corrective eyewear. So if any of those things change, we need to repeat the face fit test. The figure that has been quoted by the Fit to Fit scheme, which is recognised as good practice by the HSE, is no longer than 2-year intervals. Even if all those variables remain the same, no longer than 2-year intervals would be good practice. However, certain sectors or certain employers would choose to exceed that recommended best practice. So, for example, the asbestos removal industry, we're dealing with a category 1 carcinogen. We have a heavy reliance on RPE. They would typically choose to test 12-month intervals, 1-year intervals. Also, some of the larger construction companies I've seen are requesting 12-month repeat tests. From a commercial point of view, I think everyone needs a face fit test every 2 to 3 weeks. But
And how long do we have to keep the documentation for?
Documentation should be retained for 5 years. But again, I think, and this is purely my opinion, that a lot of the time we're talking about chronic ill health with really, really long latency periods. So if an employer is potentially looking to protect themselves from a future civil action, they may consider retaining it for longer than this. But the short answer I would give is 5 years. Personally, if I was running a business, I would keep these indefinitely, stroke 40 years, the same as I would for anything to do with occupational health.
Okay, thank you very much for everything.
My pleasure. I've got a bit of a
back to Rob.
Throwing masks around the last 40 minutes.
Yeah, so if there are any other questions, there's nothing else that's come up on the chat there. So I think you must have, that was so detailed. I think you've probably covered all the bases there, Nathan. So
I don't think I really either during that, so I can take a few minutes to catch my breath and have a cup of tea, very sure.
Is there any way you could kind of sum up, you know, your session in maybe a few words, some of the key aspects that you think are really important to hold on to?
Yeah, I could try and offer a few points. Quite often I find, and this isn't a blanket statement, but quite often I find face fit testing is only undertaken when it's been asked for by a client or an insurer, or to get on a certain site, or for a CHAS application or a SMAS application. It is a legal requirement for anyone who wears a mask, but forget about the legal aspect. This is a moral obligation. We need to make sure that people are protected. A common failing that I find across the board is a lack of user training. Quite often an employer will issue respiratory protective equipment, may or may not be face fit tested, but no information comes across with it. We need people to understand how the device functions. We need to understand the significance of being clean shaven, the significance of correct and consistent use, and people just don't know enough about masks. I think we need to educate, especially for facial hair. Now, I'm not going out there saying that every person must be clean shaven. What I like to try and get across is that these devices will not protect the wearer if we're with facial hair, so we need to understand other options. There's loose fitting. We can try and control the hazard by other means. We can move the person away from the hazard, but in order for any type fitting mask to protect, that person must be clean shaven. So that's a bit of a contentious point. Facial hair is bang on trend.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty much what I would add.
No, that's all. It's always the issue. I realise that with the facial hair, and you know, basically anybody who wants to have a beard and look as cool as me, you know, you're not going to be able to have a face fit test, are you? That's the long and the short of it.
I don't think that it's much of a hardship in most instances to be clean shaven in order to protect your long-term health. But
absolutely,
I come from an asbestos background where it's accepted that we have reliance on masks. I think other sectors may need to take a leaf from that book as well.
No. Yeah, absolutely right. It's just part and parcel of the role. Unfortunately, that's what you've got to accept. So, for your own personal safety, absolutely. Excellent. All right, listen, we've not had any more questions through, but I don't think we're going to get any now. People are drifting away. But yeah, just thanks again, Nathan. It's been really, really interesting. I just want to say to everybody, thanks for tuning in on this webinar. And please keep your eye out for others. We've got a real program now. We've got a very dynamic committee now who are actively out there and encouraging different webinars and speakers and so on, and getting lots of things booked into the diary. So just please check out on the social media and also on the IIRSM website. Please join the IIRSM Yorkshire and Humber group on the LinkedIn page as well, and you'll obviously get updates from that. And thanks to everybody who regularly contributes to that, and also to the WhatsApp group as well, and putting stuff out there, because it just helps keep the community going. So thanks to all. Thanks to Nathan. Anything else you want to ask, Sam? Are you back to the grind now, kid?
No, I'm back to work. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thanks again,
everybody.
Simone.
Thanks for joining. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.